Morning, everyone. Apologies for the use of the technology. I'm hoping that you can see and hear all three of us. I'm delighted. We are delighted to be here this morning, and I'd like to introduce my colleagues, Sue Ormerod from Nigel Wright. Sue and I have worked together for many, many years, and share a passion for addressing gender and indeed many diversity and inclusivity challenges in the tech sector. Lynsey and I have worked together for a number of years as well, and we met a couple of years ago, putting together a paper for a Dynamo conference last year. And my name's Alastair. I'm from the University of Sunderland. I should have said that, sorry, Lynsey's from 50/50, which is a fantastic organisation with the objective of trying to get a 50/50 gender split across the tech workforce. So hopefully, if we can move on to the next slide. Or maybe not.
See them okay?
I'm not sure if Lynsey's there. Okay, we can do this a different way, and hopefully that it'll make sense when we're going through the recording. So, the the objectives in our session is to look at a number of the ways that we have worked together to address the gender balance in the tech sector in the Northeast region. Looking at the concepts of power and the impact of a gender balanced workforce, which we think is really important, and then looking at how we raise awareness on gender coded language. And Sue will pick up with gender coded language later on this morning in the presentation, and then Lynsey will pick up and look at how we can do things, what you can do, what action plans, what activities you can put in place in your own workplace or in the environment that you're working in. Thank you.
The next slide's up now, Alastair.
Thank you. So, looking at the Northeast region, and this is where we've sort of based our discussion and our working on, and using it as a case study. We think that it's applicable and generalizable across the other regions in the UK, but we're particularly passionate about doing things in the Northeast, as I'm sure you know. We are aware and know and recognise that there is a digital skills gap in the Northeast region. That's a challenge that everybody faces across the tech sector, not just in tech organisations, but in any number of organisations and workplaces. Linked in with the digital skills gap is that there is a gender imbalance in the region. And this manifests itself in a number of ways. There's imbalance in the number of women working in the tech sector, and that is challenge enough in its own right. However, when you start to drill down into what that imbalance looks like, that it actually becomes even more problematic and more concerning. And we look at the jobs that women do when they're in the tech sector, they tend to be skewed towards either admin roles or health roles. And those are worthy roles and worthy tasks to be doing. Of course they are, but it just shows the disparity across the breadth of roles that there are in the sector. And we would hope that there would be equivalence across all the different tasks that there are that make up the tech sector. When we start to look at pay as a metric and a measure, then we come across some fairly disheartening and worrying statistics. So 75% of businesses in the Northeast pay men more than they do women for doing the same job. and that is something that we've been trying to address and trying to work on. The actually recognizing it is a significant first step, and then agreeing what we're going to do with it as a follow-up. When we've surveyed and we've looked at a number of different surveys in the region, over 75% of people agree that there is gender discrimination existing in the workplace today, particularly in the tech sector. So, how do we address this? How do we think about this? Well, there are a number of points, pinch points, and opportunities to raise awareness, to raise an understanding of the issues, and start to address the issues. And I'll come on to that just in a second when we look at education. Sue will pick that up, and Lynsey will pick it up later in the presentation. It's really, really useful to have strong women working in the tech sector that can act as role models for women to aspire to, whether these are young women in school, or whether these are women returning to work after a career break, or whether these are women at any point in their career. And I'm delighted to say that both Sue and Lynsey are strong and wonderful role models to aspire to. It's important that we keep talking about the issue and promoting it and raising it in various different fora. And in the Northeast, there are a number of different bodies, organisations that we do this, and we talk about it. So, for example, Dynamo is a Northeast tech cluster. A couple of things to look at that from recently. We have a Dynamo conference, and there's always a strong emphasis on inclusivity and diversity, and indeed tackling directly gender imbalance. Last year at our annual awards, the Dynamites Awards, we had a women-only panel for judging the awards. We wanted to go and say it should be women-only nominations, but there is a little bit of tension and a little bit of resistance when you start to talk about this area. So it's not plain sailing by any means. Other examples of organisations that are actively addressing the issues around gender are Sphere, and both Sue and I are members of the steering board on that, the advisory board on that, the IT Directors Forum, and we've had a number of talks at that forum around inclusivity and diversity, and the BCS in the Northeast branch. Last year we had an event that was delivered by colleagues from BCS London branch, who came up and looked at a framework that they have used and utilised and developed to include women in the tech sector. So if those statistics aren't worrying and scary enough, then you look at the hard facts and look at the monetary and financial implication. And gender-based work discrimination costs the UK economy £123 billion a year, and that's probably a gross underestimate. And once you start to look at financial issues like that, it can help and change the focal point. Thanks, Sue.
Next slide's up, Alastair.
Thank you. So in education, and there are a number of places and points that we can look to address this and raise awareness. So before people make the decision about their subjects at GCSE, so pre-year 9, get in the role models, get in the environment, get in the enthusiasm, and get in the opportunity into young people's minds as a really important point. Us young people look at making their decision about going to college and university, again promoting the opportunities around the tech sector for women and for men, of course, but predominantly raising the awareness for women. As we go through further and higher education, putting in infrastructure to support and encourage participation. So a number of things that we've done around looking at giving female students the opportunity to have a female personal tutor, so they've got somebody to go and talk to, a role model that they can share in confidence any issues and concerns that they have. Looking at female mentors, particularly female mentors from industry, to help that aspirational aspect, but also to guide in career path and career making decisions. Looking at how we address gender in the curriculum, and the tech curriculum, whether it's science or maths, or in our area, really looking at computer science, thinking about how we take out, first of all, understand and appreciate any biases that are there, and then consider them and remove them, so that we are addressing the curriculum in a positive and inclusive way. And then there are things such as the Athena Swan Initiative and Tech Talent Charter, which really help focus the mind by having a number of principles to adhere to, but also to encourage us to look at the data, and that's really, really important. Other points, and we work very closely with all universities in the region, work very closely with our employer base to look at how we move to employment, and so we'll pick those some of those issues up in a second. Looking at what we do after education, and looking at CPD and encouraging development and continuous review of the skill set, and making sure that is available to all. Looking at women returners, it tends to be the case that when folks have families, that women take time off. It's not always the case, and it shouldn't necessarily be the case, of course. But it tends to be that women have a career break, and how we encourage women to come back into the workplace is a really important aspect. And the last point for me is that what we're really about is trying to kick in the glass ceiling and make this a level and even playing field for all. So that's for me. I'll hand over to Sue, who will pick up some of the opportunities around language. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Alastair. So when I was asked to do this talk, a similar talk last year, it was really interesting because I wanted to see where this came from and where it started. So to give this some context, I've worked in IT recruitment for a considerable time, over 20 years, and finding women for certain roles, program managers, project managers, has never been a problem. But finding women who can code and who do more technical skills has been. However, you'll be very pleased to know that the trend going forward for some of the more analytical roles is certainly for people who can problem solve and who have skills that don't necessarily need a technology degree to actually get involved in. So when I looked back at the context of this, back in 1959, which is over 60 years ago, a lady called Marie Hicks found that computer operating started as a female biased industry, and females were testing several electronic programs and computers that the government were trialing. Once they trained some new hires, they were then demoted to an assistant grade, and all of the workforce coming in after that was men. And when you look at it and you start to look at points through history, you can see that that shaped it as a masculine industry. And there's other things as well, but then men displaced thousands of women. And to me, that was a real catalyst for change. And we're seeing additional catalysts for change now. So it's 2020, what a year, an extraordinary year in many respects. And we're still looking at this. So when you do the digging to find out why we're still striving for a diverse workforce, how do we harness the advantages of a gender balanced workforce? It's well documented. It's much better for the industry. It's much better for a company to have a very balanced workforce. You get more debate, you get more challenge, you get many, many benefits. So then how do we attract females into technology roles? So could I have the next slide, Lynsey? So when you look at the sector, I've titled this slide Gender Coded Language because there is loads of evidence around the sector and the language. So we know that words can be gender coded because some appeal to females, some appeal to male. And my piece today is just to make you think about what you're reading and to stop you judging it by what you read and to read between the lines, really. So Total Jobs did a really interesting survey between 2017 and the end of 2019, looking at words that have a known bias. So the most biased sector for male roles was science, with 60% of the adverts biased towards male. The surprising sector for gender neutral, I'll come to in a moment, is something you won't expect. But the most bias for females was in social care, and that was 80% of the words, and all of those adverts were geared towards females. The surprise for me was that skilled trades are the most gender neutral. They don't attract male, they don't attract female. They look purely on ability and skill. When you look at more senior roles, sadly, the higher the role, the higher the level of the role, the more male biased words are used in those adverts. And of course, this will run into job descriptions as well. So in the Northeast and in the North generally, we have very strong advocates for challenging this. And there's a number of different organisations and networks, and Newcastle University have a very strong lead on this in the North. And Lynsey from 50/50, who's going to follow me, is working with many Northeast businesses who are doing this really successfully. But obviously you can't create women at a certain level in an organisation. You've got to see and make sure that you train them through. So just a chance to get your thinking cap on. Lynsey, you've had that, you preempted it, thanks very much. These are some words that are used in job adverts, job descriptions, and when you look at them and you read them, everyone will do this. You look at them and think, oh, that's not me, or that is me, that's not me, that is me. And when you're looking at job specs and job descriptions, I can bet that it will influence as to whether or not you will look at that role if you're a woman, and also if you're a man. So the next slide, Lynsey, we've got colour-coded, red is male and green is female. Now, we can't have an interactive session on this to see if you pick the right ones, but if you just have a think about and a reflection about, I know why I didn't look at that, that is the power of gender-coded language and how biased it can be when you're looking at adverts, and how biased it can be when you look at something and think, no, I couldn't do that. I'm not analytical, or I'm not confident, or I'm not a leader in that. I can manage it, but I can't lead. And I know that's a bit of a statement, but when you think about it, and I've interviewed many women in my career who look at a job spec and who would think, no, I can't do that because it doesn't sound like me. That internal voice that everybody has, if it doesn't sound like you won't apply for it. And that's sad, because probably, most likely, you can. And I can see that someone's just put in the comments there that they can think of jobs that have used that type of language, and it is very gendered. And the good news is people are tackling it. I'm involved in a lot of HR director groups as well, and this is top of their agenda, especially in inclusion, diversity, and equality. It's really, really becoming a really big agenda item in boards. Have the next slide, please, Lynsey. So I suppose, how do you tackle it? How do you beat it? Well, first of all, it's that internal voice that you have. If you know your own skills, and you will know your own skills, you just possibly might not shout about your own skills, because typically women don't do that. Be aware of the language you use in your inner voice, but be aware of the language if you're sitting here and you're going to recruit. Be aware of the language you use when you are writing a job specification, writing a job advert, and make sure that you don't bias it in one way or another. Use language, if you want to, that represents your vision, values, and purpose of your organisation, because chances are that's been crafted to be gender neutral. So when you think about a company's marketing literature, it should be balanced. It should attract people who have similar vision, values, and purpose, because that's where potentially you will be at your most happiest. In an advert, we all know, it's very commonly known now, that men will apply even if they meet 60% of a job spec and a requirement list. But a woman will only apply if it can tick everything. And the number of times, I wish I had £1 for every time somebody said that to me, I would be a millionaire. You do not need to tick everything on the list. The list is generally a wish list. It's not a must-have. It's not a prerequisite. Unfortunately, it can sometimes just be a list in order. And if you can tick 60%, then you would probably get an interview. Because if you can demonstrate you can do it, but the challenge you have is in your head. You have to get over that. As a female in business, you have to believe in yourself first. And then if you believe in yourself, as our keynote speakers just said, then you will be able to apply, or you should apply. The worst that people can say is no. And they may not do it personally to you. They'll do it on email, or they'll do it in a letter. I think, do letters still exist? I'm not sure. But the first step is reading it, ignoring what you feel is perhaps not the language for you, getting by. And if you're writing the list, if the list is too long, really? Do you really need all of these skills? Be a bit more critical, and also be critical of your job specifications, because internal appointments, if they're too technical and job spec might have been there for years, and you tweak it if you've got somebody leaving, that probably hasn't been looked at for 4 years. Have a little look, see if you need everything in that. And I suppose what I'd encourage you to do is just leave that bias, your bias, away and think, can I do that job? Do I like that organisation? Does it fit with my vision, purpose, and values? So I'm going to apply. I'd like to hand over to Lynsey. I hope that's been useful. This is really weird because we can't see any faces, but I hope it has been useful.
Oh.
So Lynsey, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, both Alastair and Sue. So I'm one half of 50/50 Future, and we're training and consultants within the diversity and inclusion space, but we have a particular specialism in the gender side of things. And having a background in technology, I definitely have an affinity to the sector, and it holds a soft spot with what we do. Saying that, I work with a number of companies from SMEs right the way up to larger corporates, trying to tackle issues with regards to diversity and inclusion to make it a more welcoming environment for everyone to really thrive. My point here today is really to give people a framework or some food for thought with regards to what they can maybe do in either professionally or personally to really make that positive action and change. So I'm going to talk you through our 7 steps to better balance. This is our own methodology that really underpins our approach to diversity and inclusion. We're big believers that it needs to be holistic and it shouldn't fall down to one person. So this is not something that just HR functions are solely responsible for. So we'll go through, and as I said in the chat box, feel free to chat away, interrogate, question as we go. So I'm going to cover the first point, which would be first impressions. So first impressions really have the ability to make or break a business. And if you're applying for roles, you're naturally going to seek out whatever information you can about that company. So you're going to go to their website, you're going to look at the imagery, consciously or subconsciously, you're going to be looking at that language that Sue's touched on, and whether it is implicit or explicit, we're going to start to make associations with what we're reading and what we're seeing. So from a personal perspective, things to be aware of, you can look at things like how diverse their boards are, what they're publicly putting out on their website with regards to diversity and inclusion. Things like parental policies, flexible working are all good things that I would go to seek out to get a feel for that organisation. From a professional side of view or from a corporate side of view, really interrogate your website to see how inviting and how welcoming it is. So again, look at the language, look at the imagery, look at the placement of things and what external comms you're really putting out there. We know that research shows us that when considering to apply for a role or not, 56% of women will actually look at whether an organisation is publicly sharing information with regards to its progress and diversity. So it's really key that you either put that on there or seek it out, as I said, to get that feel. So moving on to culture and really ensuring that environment of inclusion. So for me, diversity is all about the numbers, but actually inclusion's the key, and we want everyone to feel like they can be themselves in the workplace. When it comes to culture and a robust D&I strategy, you really want to be looking at things like what team building activities are happening internally. Are the activities fun for everyone? Or sometimes we're really guilty, particularly in the tech sector, of swaying towards that bro culture activity side of things. The beer fridge at 4:30 on a Friday, meeting at the pub at the end of the week. Another thing to really look at is, do you have a company full of clones? Which can be really easy to happen. And you kind of look around one day and see your tech department is all white males, possibly in hoodies, the stereotypical headphones on. When we hire, we really need to be conscious of hiring on being culture complementary rather than being a culture fit. I feel like sometimes companies really get caught up in that culture fit of having to fit the mold, where actually we need that diversity of thought internally to make us more innovative and creative. And another thing under culture to really think about is, how diverse are your celebrations? So sometimes we'll celebrate International Women's Day, International Men's Day, perhaps things like Black History Month. It's important that we acknowledge all of these, but personally for me, it's not about celebrating International Women's Day on International Women's Day. It's about having that theme throughout your organisation and giving it the attention it deserves throughout the year and not just on that one occasion. So if we move on to retention, retention's a really key one, and data is really your friend and par. So we need to be measuring turnover. We need to understand what data is telling us and how much it's costing organisations. We know that 36% of new hires quit after being hired because it wasn't what they were expecting. Again, with retention, things like your policies and procedures are really key. Are they written in normal English? Are they easily accessible for everybody? Or are they hidden away on an intranet or a database that aren't readily available? Sue has already touched on a lot with regards to recruitment and trying to make that recruitment journey as inclusive as possible. So we've talked about gender-coded language. A really actionable, easy thing to do is online, you'll be able to find loads of kind of search engines or tools, AI tools that will sense check copy for you. So a lot of job boards have these gender-coded tools online, the likes of Total Jobs, or there's paid versions with companies like textio.com. And it's a really good way of sensing your copy and paste it in. It'll pull out masculine and feminine words and it'll give you neutral alternatives. Really great if you're writing things like job descriptions, sense checking website copy, or even things internally like those policies to really understand how they might come across to different employees. With regards to recruitment, you want to be thinking about things like diverse hiring panels. You want to make sure that everybody is aware of where they sit in terms of positive discrimination versus positive selection. This is a really close one to my heart. So positive discrimination, firstly, is illegal and nobody should be doing it. people should not be hired based solely on their protected characteristics when they're potentially not suitable for the job. Positive selection for me is when you have two candidates that have been through the whole interview process, you're down to the final stages, and it's completely equal in terms of merit. I encourage positive selection by choosing the candidate that is from that protected group to bring that diverse nature to your company. Now, key with this is to be really transparent about why you're doing it and how you're doing it to the wider organisation, and the narrative needs to be really careful. We don't want colleagues to be confused or quickly jump to assumptions about positive discrimination and selection, and it's important they know of the difference and why the company is choosing to recruit in that way. Let's just briefly touch on progression. So internally with an organisation, things that I would be looking out for would be mentoring schemes. So is there a system internally that, one, you could benefit from personally, or is there one that you can implement professionally? Things like external mentors as well and reverse mentoring all add a really good dynamic. And again, it's about that diversity of thought and getting different perspectives on things. Another thing to maybe note in progression would be what training opportunities are available within inside an organisation and what upskilling options are available, again, within a company. Figure that out in terms of what you can offer colleagues and potential employees. But also, if you're looking to apply for a company, something to ask them is where you can go with your career. How can you further develop yourself and get the most out of your job role that you want? Progression, let's also touch on maybe the promotion process. So we know that males and females have got different characteristics and traits, and we sometimes treat different situations, even as individuals, very differently. If we can try and standardise things like promotion processes to remove any bias and kind of remove as much subjectivity as possible, it kind of levels the playing field for everybody and gives everybody the right access and opportunities to really take their career wherever they want to. That doesn't necessarily mean that you always have to climb that corporate ladder. It could also be different job roles or different career changes in a lateral process as well. So don't always think that you have to go up and up. You can also take sideways steps to meet your own needs. When we think about leadership, so when it comes to diversity and inclusion in the workplace, there really needs to be commitment and buy-in from everybody. So if it's just an HR issue or if it's just a tick box exercise, it's not going to have the positive impact that we really need to make the change. And really to do this, it needs to be led from the top. So really from board and senior leadership teams, and colleagues and the wider organisation need to drive the agenda too. So it's a kind of two-pronged approach to have that running thread throughout everything. We need to make sure that diversity and inclusion and strategies that we have in place are aligned and measured, particularly to the likes of company objectives and targets. We have other targets in place, whether they be sales, whether they be deadlines, whether they're financial motives. Diversity and inclusion should be given that board as well, or that importance as well. We also need to make sure that not just our leadership teams, but ourselves, we all have a learning mentality. So there's a real importance about having that learning mindset and being open to trying new things and trying to absorb as much information as possible from the resources around us. A great way to do this would be through feedback. And sometimes feedback can be really uncomfortable, but it's a really important step to really improve and to learn and to iterate on what we're up to. And lastly, moving on to reputation. So both as a company and as an individual, what do you stand for? What are either your corporate values or your own personal values? Are you living and breathing them? And are they reflected from a corporate perspective, both internally and externally? So things that I look out for with organisations would be, are you actively advocating for others? A great way I've seen to do this, and I know that Alastair touched on the education side of things, but particularly in the tech sector or STEM sectors, can you go and mentor younger people? Can you get involved with things like STEM ambassadors and give back your time to really help nurture the younger generations coming through and open their eyes to the possibilities, particularly within the tech sector? They're endless and exciting, and if you're not in it, you don't know. So it's really important that we give back and pay it forward, so to speak. Also, in terms of your networks, how can you be more diverse and engage with different audiences? So, as I said, my background is in the sector, and I think, hands up, definitely guilty of networking, particularly with the same groups of people. Going to the same networking groups, having the same cups of coffee with that one person that you spoke to last time that you felt really comfortable with. And it's sometimes hard to look outside that bubble and put yourself in uncomfortable positions and learn from others. An example of how I've been doing this recently, so as I said, 50-50 really looks at the gender side of things. Now, all of our learnings are transferable to all other strands of diversity, but as a white woman, I can't profess to understand the challenges and barriers faced by other groups. So I've been trying to absorb as much information as possible, particularly off the back of, for example, Black Lives Matter. Trying to join webinars, trying to read as much as I can to even understand slightly some of those issues that are being faced to friends and colleagues around me. And that's a really good way of trying to diversify your networks. And it can be uncomfortable and it can sit very strange in your stomach because, particularly as white individuals, and maybe more so personally speaking, it's not an environment we're used to from coming of one of those with white privilege, particularly joining webinars or groups in a room full of Black people. It's not something that's the norm. It should be. We should all feel comfortable, but you need to step outside your comfort zone, think outside the box, and really try and, as I said, learn. It's all of our individual responsibilities to go out and see what we can do and be proactive to really broaden our horizons, so to speak. Now, I just talked at you for ages. I'm going to have a quick look through the chat function that we've got to see if there's anything that I can pick up on and anything I can maybe elaborate on. So, Kirsten, you've seen job adverts for an IT project manager role this week. Blue chip experience will definitely rule out a lot of experienced skilled candidates and would be interesting to know if they get more male female. Recruitment's a really key one for us at 50-50. And when companies approach us, generally it's because they can't get the candidate pool or the talent split that they want when they're advertising their roles. And I'm sure that Sue knows tons more about this than I do. I can definitely sympathise with that. I think one of the things that you've definitely hit the nail on the head, Kirsten, is that there's often essential lists of criteria, and Sue's covered that. And often these job adverts are copy and pastes, and there's not much thought that goes into them. Not intentionally, because people are fighting the fire of the world, and it's just you go into automatic pilot. So try not to be put off, and definitely challenge things in job descriptions. And if you're responsible for that internally, I would also advise that you, like you would A/B market test, write different job descriptions for the same role, because that's going to naturally attract different people depending on how they perceive information. Also, sorry, Kimberly, I can see that you are applying for tech jobs. You feel inadequate when looking at job descriptions. You had an interview recently with a huge job spec and it was very stressful prep. It's horrible. And you know, I don't think it's led by intent. I think often we're really guilty of not understanding the consequences of those awful job descriptions. And we don't realise that we're putting people off. It's just an awful side effect of what we're doing. I think for us, when we work with organisations or when we speak to organisations with regards to recruitment, it is a key challenge and a key barrier for many people within the industry. But there needs to be a connected strategy in place, and that's why these 7 steps to better balance are really important. So it's all well and good fixing your recruitment, fixing in inverted commas, but if you don't have the culture to really support a new hire that you're bringing in, or if you don't have the leadership team that have been trained and equipped with the skills to really foster that talent, or if your reputation really sucks externally, all of your efforts in one of these areas are going to be really fruitless, and it really needs to be connected. Now, folks, before we kind of head on, I'm conscious that it's only 11:10. Is there any other questions from people? Let's try and make it a little bit more interactive in terms of your experiences, maybe some of the challenges you've faced, or things that you've noted that haven't sat right with you in terms of diversity and inclusion, or from the education piece, or from the recruitment side of things.
While people are thinking, Lynsey, you mentioned there about mentoring. And do you know, it's really interesting. Most people will presume or assume that folk don't have mentors. And a lot of people have mentors. They have business mentors inside their business, but also outside of their business. And I've had several business mentors over the years. And when you identify a skill that you feel really uncomfortable doing, or a behavior, if you find somebody who's good at it and who you admire for it, would you believe if you ask them, just say, I really admire how you do that. Can we have a coffee and just discuss it? Because that's something that I need to challenge in myself. And you will be amazed. People generally, 99.9%, will really want to help. And, you know, I've had some absolutely brilliant people who've helped me in my career, and they're not in my business. They're outside of my business and are users of our services. And you only learn if you ask challenging questions. So ask for feedback, garner that feedback, and take it as it's meant. Don't take it personally, because it isn't. It's meant to help you grow. And if you can do that, I think our keynote was talking about being brave. It is about being brave and saying, yep, I know I'm not very good when I'm challenged, and I can see that you can handle that situation really well. Can you give me some hints? And people will generally just say, yeah, of course. I don't know how I'm good at it, but yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's special.
I think even the term mentor can have this scary connotation associated with it. So where do you even start to go and get a mentor would be a common thing that we're asked, because we're big advocates that everybody should have one, regardless of their seniority, gender, whoever they might be. And often people have mentors around them anyway. They just don't have that official title. A really great exercise that people can maybe do in their own time would be just think of all the people that you would go to for advice or to soundboard your ideas. Even try and list 4. A good way to try and diversify your mentors is looking at those 4 people that you would go to. 1, look at their gender, look at their locality to you, and look at what you go to chat to them about. Look at things like their marital status, their ethnicity. We often find that our mentors or those soundboarders that we go to are also clones of ourselves, or the majority of them would be clones. And that's a really great way of forcing yourself to have a different view on who you go to, and again, seek somebody else out. And so you're totally right. I would say 99% of times, if you go and approach somebody and say, look, this is a particular area I'm struggling with, or actually, you just really fascinate me, or I find this really interesting about what you're doing. Can we have a coffee? You might not need to go with a specific issue or question, but the natural flow of conversation, you're organically, things are going to be drawn out and you're going to take away so much from it. So definitely top tip, go and get yourself mentors. Would be cool.
Lynsey, I can see that Kimberly's put another comment on, and I suppose, and sorry to call you out on it, Kimberly, but because we're female, we will prep for every eventuality in that interview. Sorry, Alastair, who's listening, because a man wouldn't necessarily, they would probably be more prepared to wing it. And you know what the trend I'm seeing now, especially with more online interviews, because companies are just cracking on with recruitment. They're not waiting, because you can't be in a waiting room as a business. You've got to continue. And video interviewing works, but you've got to practice it. You've got to practice trying to be how you would normally be. And that's hard. So practice it with a best friend, practice your interview technique, practice how you're going to describe yourself, practice how you're going to give your little elevator pitch to somebody who knows you, who can have a giggle at the other end of the screen. But then they'll say to you, yeah, do you know you move your hands a lot, or you scratch your face, or you keep looking away, or you're looking down here and all I can see is the top of your head? Because until somebody tells you, you're never going to learn. And my experience is just ask for that feedback. And you mentioned in your comment on there, all they wanted to do was get to know you. Majority of first interviews are vision, values, purpose. Do they fit? Do you fit them? Do you fit with where they're going as a business? Are you traveling at the same speed? And do you share that? Because ability, capability, and the will, you can't train that. You've got to try and see if that's there. So I feel your pain, because I've had so many of my candidates say this. I prepped for this and they asked me that. But you know what? You were ready. And the second interview, hopefully you'll get it. You've done the prep. Because what is it? It's prepare, 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 and prepare again.
Yeah,
And
I think it's also
following on
important.
from Sue's point,
Interviews
and
can be quite
it's about
daunting,
being confident and
if
showing
you
confidence.
turn it on its head,
and
it's also your opportunity to
so much
interview
of
the
that
company.
comes with
So you want to
practice
find out what they're up to,
and
what
just
they're like, what
being
their
aware
culture
that
is.
you're there to
and
what
do
you're
your
there
homework
for,
too, to see if they're the
and
right
you know
fit
that
for
you've
you.
been asked for an interview.
Alastair, I can
then
see that you're on mute, but you're
they're really
talking,
interested in
so you
talking
might
with
have to
you.
translate
So
that.
be confident. and
Alastair,
don't-
we can't hear you.
Oh, I've got my mute off.
There you are. Oh, there you are.
You muted me. This is power. Sue's controlling me. I was just saying about confidence, and confidence being the important thing. You know, if you're in an interview situation, or whether it's a formal or informal situation, you know, being yourself, being confident, and just putting out what you're good at, what you're comfortable with, and not being frightened to say, you know, that's not something that I'm so good at. I haven't got a lot of experience in that, but I'm really willing to pick that up. I've got other strengths that show that I could pick that up. You know, so it's about being aware and being confident. It's so important.
And you know, you said a really key thing there, Alastair. And I say this to candidates, and if there's anybody on who knows me, I'm sorry, because you're going to hear it again. If you're not yourself at the interview, the wrong person gets the job. And then you have to be that other person. So authenticity is really important, because, you know, the person that client sees, that company sees, is the person they'll want to employ. And if you walk through the door and you're not that, it's hard.
Yeah.
So it's hard to do as well. I can see Lynsey nodding.
Martina, I just want to pick up on your comment in the chat box about how you felt the language was a real barrier. And it's valid what you say, that you applied regardless of the fact you're female, but the fact that you picked up on it in the first place it's an alarm bell for me, because there's going to be other females being put off. So I would definitely recommend going back to talent acquisition, wherever the job spec came from, and just giving them your feedback and just explaining that this was your experience and you're aware. I don't know whether you're in a technical position, but I would imagine that there's probably a gender imbalance anyway. So go back to them, explain to them just some feedback of the recruitment process. This is my experience. Potentially you might want to look at this and see what they do with it. If they don't do anything with it, well then that's their downfall and their flaw. But it's definitely worth, I would say, feeding that back to see if they can make any changes to the way that they're writing their job ads. Kirsten, yeah, about being your authentic self. That's so true. I think some people think that they need two versions. They've got the home one, and then you've got who you take into the workplace. And particular circumstances at the minute have really broken down those barriers, because now we're in each other's homes. You're currently sat in my kitchen, and it brings that humanity side to the workplace that was maybe missing beforehand. So it'll be interesting to see how workplaces move on. We've definitely seen a shift in the work that we do due to circumstances at the minute. I don't want to talk about the big COVID thing too much. But yes, I think the workplaces are changing, which hopefully means more opportunities in terms of remote working, and particularly tech is going to be a massive one of how we go forward and really navigate the times that we're facing. So should we just maybe summarise up, folks, and then if there's anything else, by all means, please keep putting them through the chat box. It's really nice that it's been quite interactive as well. To summarise from our point of view, so consider the environment that you're currently working in, or consider the one that you're looking to join, and interrogate it in every way that you possibly can to make sure that it's right for you. With the 7 steps to better balance that we went through, hopefully it'll give you a framework or a bit of a tool that you can either self-audit your own workplace, or you can look at things from a different perspective when applying for organisations and applying for those roles that you're looking for. And then create an action plan for your workplace. So really create an action plan for yourselves. So from my side, and banging the drum of diversity and inclusion, everybody is responsible for creating inclusion or exclusion, and we all have a role to play to make everyone feel like they belong and can be their true authentic selves that we're talking about. So really take that forward, do some homework, do some research, and see how you can help and how we can try and make the world a better place without the corny, cheesy side to it.
And somebody once said to me, Lynsey, and I suppose this is in context of Kirsten's comment there, if you ignore it, you condone it.
Yeah.
And it's hard. That's hard. That goes in the really hard bucket.
Yeah.
Because it's like walking past litter on the street. If you walk past it, you're saying, well, it's okay with me. It sadly is the same in a business environment. And it's challenging and it's awkward and it's uncomfortable. But the more people do it, the less it will become prevalent.
Totally.
And it's not okay.
This is where signing up to something like the Tech Talent
just
Charter
put up all of our
is really, really
contact
positive,
details
because it gives a framework to consider the language.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Alastair, could you repeat that?
So just picking up on the point that Martina and both Kirsten have raised, that it can be difficult to challenge, but using a framework like the Tech Talent Charter really gives you a ground for discussion about things like adverts, to deal with it, things like reports and the use of language in the workplace, and it can ease the barrier a little bit by using the framework that somebody else provides.
Definitely. Tech Talent's a massive resource, definitely worth checking out. If there's anything else that we can help with post-session, so at 50/50 we are now running virtual coffee sessions for half an hour. So if anybody wants to come and pick our brains about anything diversity and inclusion related, or just to expand your network and looking at the mentoring side of things, by all means come along and book in a chat with either myself or my co-founder, Lynsey Britton, and I've no doubt that Sue and Alastair would be more than happy for anyone to reach out to them for any advice or tips or pointers.
Yeah, that's perfect. And thank you for listening, everybody. It's been a real pleasure being part of it. I'm going to have to dip off because I'm going into another session, but thank you, Alastair, for inviting me, and Lynsey again. And LinkedIn profiles, if there's anything, our email addresses, I think, are part of this somewhere. But thanks very much and for your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. Yes, folks.
Thanks, everyone. It's been really interesting. I hope nobody gets too enthused by Lynsey and I's karaoke photograph at the end. It just shows confidence.
I love it. This time last year, Alastair, I think. Awesome. We'll leave you there, folks. Enjoy the rest of your day.